I've given this a lot of thought and I'd stop investing if this happens. Now, it's nothing to do with the price of the stock market, whether it's too high right now or I think there's a bubble. It's nothing to do with inflation or interest rates, and it definitely has nothing to do with any global events happening right now in the world. This is something I've been thinking about for a long time now, and I wonder if you also think the same. It's not that easy to explain, but I'll try and do my best with a couple of stories that are quite popular in the investing space. So this first one you might have already heard, and I came across it in The Psychology of Money, which is a book I've read a couple of times now, well worth picking up. Now, it's about a guy called Ronald Reed who worked and lived in a poor part of America, quite a rural part of America, did kind of tough manual jobs, worked in the army at a gas station, and then later on as a janitor. Now, nothing remarkable about the guy, very, very frugal guy, raised a family and did everything that you're kind of meant to do. Then, when he passed away, it was discovered that he had millions of dollars worth of investments. Basically, throughout his life, he had been buying stocks with spare money that he had and was also extremely diligent and making sure to reinvest all of the dividends as well. He was also very frugal too, as I mentioned, and his friends have saying how he would only drive an old car and then even repair some of his old clothes with clips and things. Nobody knew that he managed to amass $8 million worth of a fortune, and he ended up donating $6 million of it to his local hospital and library, where he often popped in for a coffee. But they only found out that after he died. It's an interesting story, and I think it really shows the power of investing small amounts of money over a really long period of time, and getting some good stock picks along the way does help. But I do think there's another side to this story too that might not be quite as inspirational. Now, I can't make any judgments here, or I have no idea if Ronald was happy, and by all accounts he was perfectly content. But I do think there's an argument here that says that if you are investing a lot of money today, you should also try and keep an eye on why you're doing it and what you could be missing out on to do it as well. So I know we all have different reasons to invest and different goals, but I bet that most of you probably fall somewhere in kind of this financial freedom bracket. And by that, I mean you want to have enough money or investments that you can pretty much do what you like, give up work if you want, and pretty much choose how you spend your time. You probably want enough in your investments that you can easily cover all of your bills on a monthly basis with, and then maybe even have enough left for some fun too. And I guess you want to know that you can keep doing that for decades to come and maybe even forever. Now, for most of us out there, we don't need the equivalent of $8 million to do that, but I'm not going to say no if the stock market does well over the next few years. The point here is that I do think that there's a balance that we have to get right as investors, and if we sway too much towards the investing every single penny we have for this magical time called retirement, then I do think we can miss out on today and the here and now. Now, like a lot of investing channels, I often like to run a compound interest calculator and say that if you invest £200 or £300 a month for the next 30 years and put that in the stock market, you could end up with a really nice sum of money. Now, often this will be in the hundreds of thousands of pounds, and it's really motivating to know that it is possible to make large sums of money from relatively small amounts if you are consistent over the really, really long run. But when I do this, I don't really focus much attention to the other details, like asking the question, well, how much do you actually need? Or do you really want to have a huge amount of money at a certain age, which is often decades away? And the thing is, I think that if you focus too much on that time in the future, you forget to think about the money you have now and the things that the money can do right now. When I say this, it reminds me of a great read called Die With Zero. It's a book by a guy called Bill Perkins, who made a lot of money trading at quite a young age. And his philosophy, as someone who has had all this money now, wasn't about how he can just make more of it by investing it all, or trying to be a billionaire by investing in some small company or something like that. He chose to focus on actually spending it all in a way that he will quite literally die with zero. Now, I know that's a luxury position to be in, having millions of dollars in your early 30s and 40s is pretty much the dream for most people. And of course, you can argue that life is way easier when you do that and have that kind of income. But focus on the message of the book, and I think we can all take something away from it. So rather than just spend all of our time laser focused on this magical date of retirement and dreaming of a time where we don't have to work in a job that we might not enjoy, the book reminds me that we should be spending a lot more time focusing on now and making most of the money in everything from doing experiences to sharing it with family and friends now, rather than leaving it all in a will when it will have less impact. For example, he says that in a book it would be much better to help kids now with college and housing rather than leave money to them when you're no longer around, when they're probably already in their middle age and most likely have a family. Not only will you not get to see the money put to work, but it will have less impact in later life than it can today. Now, this doesn't mean that you just go spending all of your money now and just forget about investing. That's not the message at all here. but it is something I've been thinking about more often as I try and work out my own goal for investing. Now, as many of you will already know, I invest every month into my ISA and a little bit into my pension as well. And over the last few years, I've been organising everything from the mess that things did used to be in. I'd love to be able to max out my ISA allowance this year if I can, because I've been keeping my costs pretty low. I don't have any big debts, and I really enjoy that process of investing money that I don't actually need today. Now, it would be pretty weird if I was a full-time finance investing YouTuber and didn't like to invest my money, but anyway, saying all of this, I want to find the right balance. The point of the video that I really wanted to make, probably in a bit of a roundabout way, was that if I find myself investing too much of my money and just trying to be a bit of a Scrooge, I think that's when I'd actually stop investing, or at least pull back a bit. And I think this is a very personal thing that we all have to find, but I do think there is a balance to be had between spending money now and investing money now. Let me just give you another example. Let's say that we're investing now during what will be the worst time for investors over the next 20 or 30 years. Let's say this is going to be really bad and our returns won't be anywhere near what we expect. Now, that's all out of our control. We have no idea what's ahead. We stick to our investing plan, but we end up only making a tiny bit of money. Maybe we only just about match inflation. Now, that would be pretty awful, but it's also very possible. And funny enough, we can look back during the last 20 or 30 years and see how getting in at the wrong time massively affects what we end up with. For example, over 20-year rolling periods of investment, the worst time to stop in recent times was the end of 1949, as you would have been through the Great Depression and the Second World War. Your rate of return per year would have only been under 2% a year, and none of that was in your control. That's some pretty bad luck. Compare that to someone who got really lucky over a 20-year investing time horizon, and you can see what a difference that makes. If you look up here towards the end of the dot-com bubble, or even in the early 1960s, your rate of return is now more like 16 to 18% per year across those 2 decades. Again, none of this was in your control, and one of you got lucky and the other person didn't. The difference in your investing accounts would have been huge, so one of you would have been retiring early and the other person may have had to just keep on working. Life-changing sums of money, all from differences in timing. Now, for 30 years, it's not as bad, and the worst luck still gets you a return of 8% a year. Bear in mind as well, when you're looking at this, we're assuming one chunk of money in at one time. None of this applies to someone who regularly invests every time they get paid and buys both during the high times and the low times. All this is showing us is that there's no way to know what kind of period that we're investing in, and we should be prepared in case what we're investing in is not that great ahead. Saying all of this though, I'm personally optimistic. I still like to stay pretty sensible when it comes to most of the things I invest in, but I genuinely do think that now is as good a time as ever to get started investing. On that note, if you do want to get started, I keep all of the links below to my favourite platforms, and you can get yourself some free cash or stock if you go via those. Definitely make sure you make the most of your investments and use a stocks and shares ISA if you're here in the UK. That's essential in my view. Now back to this topic, let's just say we are in that worst time for investing right now, and we'd be better off spending the money today or on just about pretty much anything else. I still think that, even if we do get unlucky in the future with our investing returns, the process of investing itself makes it all worth it for me. I mean, think about it like this. If you can even think about investing, you're in a great position to begin with, because we're assuming that you have money left at the end of the month, you've paid off your expensive debts, and you've also probably got some cash in an emergency fund as well, or at least some kind of availability of cash. Just by investing, regardless of what the outcomes are, puts you in a really, really good place. And those behaviours, in my view, are really good to have whatever the future holds. The difficulty is just making sure that we try and balance what we invest in versus how much we spend today. I hope that I never try and come across as someone who wants people to invest as much as they can and just focus on that amount, because I do think there's a lot of danger in pushing out your future and saying that you'll somehow be happy because now you have a certain amount of money invested by the time you're 50, 60 or 70. None of that time is guaranteed, let alone the end value of those investments. So I really hope that in all my videos I get that point across and that you will kind of find a balance that works for you. And just to be very clear again, I am plenty optimistic about the future and there is so much opportunity out there. But today is something we also had to focus on too. So whether it's more experiences or holidays or maybe even just investing into buying stuff that you like, please do make sure that you also enjoy that too. And don't somehow feel guilty for doing it. For me at the moment, over the last year or so, I've been really taking my running seriously, and I'm going to be running the Manchester Marathon in just a couple of weeks' time. I'm completely obsessed. I watch all of the YouTube running channels, and I'm trying to do about 90k a week or so of training before I kind of taper down a bit for the big day. Now, although running is quite a low-cost activity, which is why it's really great, if you take it seriously, you'll find yourself spending a fortune on carbon-plated running shoes, all the nice gear, electrolyte tablets, and the gels too, which all add up. And before you know it, you've spent £400 on a tiny little singlet vest, some half-tight, some expensive shoes, which do make a difference, don't get me wrong, and they're fantastic. Add on some gels too at nearly £3 a pop. They are the good ones, to be fair, the high-end ones. Don't really dribble as much as the other ones. Anyway, a fancy running watch like this one, and before you know it, you've quickly spent more than most people could invest in a couple of months' time. Add all that up and invest it instead and compound it over 30 years at an average rate of return, and do you know what you end up with? I have no idea. And I'm not going to work it out because you know what? I wouldn't change it for the world. And if I had to give up everything I did today to save more for the future, sorry, I wouldn't do it and I'd have to stop investing first. Let me know if you feel the same way. I'll see you in the next video. Happy investing. £3 a pop. Got to take 6 of these in a marathon. Jesus.